Thank you all for joining this afternoon, and a special thanks to our three panellists, Amelia, Mishko and Norm, who will be providing individual insights on the concept of future procurement in New Zealand. I would first introduce the ET Network. The Emerging Talent Network was established by Infrastructure New Zealand in 2018 to develop the next generation of infrastructure leaders. The ET Network acts as a forum of discussion around infrastructure challenges and opportunities in New Zealand. It facilitates cross-sector networking opportunities for young leaders, and it provides a medium for young professionals to articulate their thoughts on particular topics to the wider industry. The network has grown from strength to strength since its inceptions, with over 700 members across New Zealand. There are many forthcoming ET events, such as webinars, inner circle events, and the Building Nations Conference later in the year. Please keep an eye out on our LinkedIn page or emails. A bit of housekeeping for today. The chat function has been disabled throughout the session, but if you'd like to pose a question to our speakers, please do so using the Q&A functionality. Throughout the session, you also have the ability to upvote those questions that you would like to be answered. So without further ado, our first panelist for the afternoon is Amelia Lindsay, Chief Planner from Beca. Amelia is a geographer by training and is also a Senior Technical Director for Beca's planning team and the Chair of Beca's Sustainability Steering Group. She's directed many community-changing strategic infrastructure, planning, statutory consents and consultation projects. Amelia is a member of the Advisory Board of New Zealand's Business Sustainable Council. She was selected for the Global Women's Breakthrough Leadership Program, a program tailored to develop the breakthrough thinking and drives exceptional leadership through performance and executive leadership teams and governance roles throughout the economic and social impacts. Thanks again, Amelia, for joining. So, are you able to give us a quick insight into your career update thus far, and then discuss the recent RMA changes and how that may be applied into future procurement in New Zealand, or by example, from previous models used, adapted in SCIRT or Kaipura? Thanks, Amelia.
Kia ora, thanks, Adam. So thank you very much for the opportunity to have a bit of a chat. And I suppose it's an interesting thing about being a planner and involved in procurement, because it's not traditionally, I suppose, where you think of the procurement process lying. But what I do as a planner, I suppose, is right at the beginning of projects, thinking about what's coming, what needs to be built and how it's going to be built. So a lot of what we do in the Resource Management Act and a lot of what we do in those systems is setting up how projects can be delivered in the future. And it has a big impact. So I've been involved in projects now, as Adam ran through, for over 20 years, and that's included lots of different infrastructure projects. It started in my second year, I suppose, at Beca, working on the designations for State Highway 16 and 18 in Hobsonville, both of which are now built and operating. I then went into the Britomart Railway Station. I've been involved in City Rail Link designations, the Waterview Connection, which is recently finished, but also involved in the project delivery and construction on projects like Manukau Harbour Crossing, a little bit on Mackay's to Peka Peka, and currently working on projects like Supporting Growth, which is the transport system for the future growth in all of Auckland's future urban areas, including South Auckland in particular, for me. And I suppose what it's shown me is how important what we set up at the planning stage is for how a project can be procured and delivered. And I think that's why the opportunities and the changes in the Resource Management Act, and I'll run through a couple of those really briefly, just as a sort of prompt, are so important for how we might procure and how we might deliver projects and how they interact with the communities in which those projects are delivered. So I've been involved in the Resource Management Act review. Now that's not the fast track legislation, though obviously there's been a little bit of interconnection between those two projects. What I've been involved with for the last 9 months for the Minister is providing a review of the whole Resource Management Act And it's a long-term review. It's not going to be part of the fast track reforms that we're seeing coming through Cabinet at the moment, but it's hopefully stuff that will be ready to take effect as that fast tracked delivery of the RMA starts to wind out. And at the moment, the government's indicating that that fast track legislation will last for around 2 years. And so that will help in the recovery process for the next couple of years. With the Resource Management Act reform, I just want to talk briefly about that and some of the ideas that we're thinking, partly to share with you where we're thinking about how that might impact on procurement, and partly to get any feedback and comment from you on ideas or sort of sentiment about where we're heading. So we reported to the Minister, we just sent the draft of that to the Minister last week actually. That's about 500 pages of suggested reform to the legislation, so it's a fairly big and fundamental reform. And we are suggesting a replacement to the Resource Management Act from that. And there's a couple of reasons for that and a couple of key themes that I wanted to highlight. And I'll just touch on how that might impact on sort of procurement processes. And then I'll just touch briefly also on designations, which is the main tool, I suppose, for delivery of infrastructure projects. So the reform to the RMA that we're talking about is about how we move from an effects-based system, which is what we have at the moment, to one that's more about outcomes. And I think Infrastructure New Zealand's been really influential and instrumental in that conversation about the importance of thinking about what we need our infrastructure to do for the communities that we're providing it for and in, and how our system can better look at how projects and how infrastructure is delivering those outcomes. So it's rather than just focusing on what effects they have on the environment, which are absolutely critical, but it's also about what sort of outcomes are we delivering by putting those things in place. A couple of other things for people who are familiar with the Resource Management Act, and I appreciate a number of you won't. We currently have about 120 plans across the country that set out how you can use resources or how you can develop in different parts of the country. And we're suggesting a significant rationalisation of that. So maybe combining plans across the country and at around regional levels, which would mean you're moving from around the 120 or 30 we have currently to about 14. And then some quite big changes on how we would look to streamline in the consenting processes. And for designations, one of the things that I'm a big advocate for, and this is perhaps more personal talking than the RMA talking, but certainly it's a sentiment that we've been working through with that process, is how you can set up a system that enables you to identify where infrastructure should go as a first step, and then later, when you're ready to build it in a community, how you can deliver it on the ground with communities, so that it's a much more something that's determined. The appropriateness of the infrastructure is the first step, and then how you deliver it and how you put it in a community is the second step. And I know others will talk a bit more about some of those procurement processes in the communities that you work with in the following speakers. Then the last thing I just wanted to talk about was, as Adam raised, that fast track recovery legislation that the government is currently looking at. And that is acknowledging the significance of the economic impact that we are experiencing, and as we come out of, fortunately for us, as we come out of the COVID pandemic. And that legislation is looking at a specific system of how you will enable consents and approvals on a fast track process. It's not unique. It's unique in its scale. So we have, as Adam raised, we have looked at this process in Christchurch and Kaikoura, but in both of those cases, I think the big difference was due to the unfortunate circumstances there. We knew what infrastructure we'd lost, and we knew what needed to be replaced. What we're talking about now with this recovery legislation is, we know what the economic impact is, but we're looking at how infrastructure can help our society and communities recover economically, socially, culturally, and environmentally over this period, and what good projects are to enable that to happen. And so the legislation is still looking to do a fast tracking of projects that meet those recovery criteria. But the important bit about it is going to be the Minister determining which projects meet those recovery thresholds, and that will be determined by an order in council through the minister, or as I understand it, there are a number of projects that they're looking to initiate the legislation with. The intention is for that legislation to go through Cabinet the middle of this month, and as I said, it will be around for 2 years, and what it will enable those qualifying projects to do is significantly streamline the consent processes so that we have a one-stop hearing, and we will have a separate process, which I can run through if anyone's interested in it, to enable those projects to go ahead without the conventional process that we have, the statutory process that we currently have under the RMA. In terms of time frame, thinking back to Kaikoura, to Christchurch, and to other streamlined consenting processes, we're looking at conventional processes being in the order of 18 to 24 months, and these ones being more in the order of 3 to 6 months in terms of processing. So it's a significant ability, I suppose, to speed up that approvals process, enabling projects that have been identified to contribute to recovery, to get going and get going quickly, which is the key economic and social driver that the government's looking for. So that's a bit of a whirlwind perspective of planning, its role in procurement, and also, as Adam said, some of the current things that are going on in the fast track recovery legislation that might help deliver this with some urgency in the coming couple of years. Back to you, Adam.
Thanks, Amelia. Yeah, really good insight there. So planning is key, and I really look forward to seeing what projects come out that qualify for the legislation. So it's a good segue into our second panelist, Mishko Ikuasa. He's the Portfolio Delivery Director of Strategic Programs for Auckland Transport. So Mishko has held a number of senior public and private sector leadership positions and roles which have required developing high-performing teams to deliver a range of complex transport and city-shaping projects. From a Polish descent, in 2006, Mishko's passion for travel and new experiences brought him to the lovely New Zealand, which he now calls home. Following his senior delivery roles at NZTA and Oricon, Mishko returned to a permanent position in Auckland Transport, looking after the strategic programs, and his portfolio currently covers the Downtown program, Amity Eastern Busway 2, 3 and 4, and the Auckland Walking and Cycling program. So thanks again, Mish, for joining us. Again, are you able to provide a quick update of your career overview and discuss how Auckland Transport's procurement models, such as alliances, are heading in this ever-changing environment? Cheers, Mish.
Absolutely. Thanks, Adam, and great to be on here chatting to you all this afternoon. I'm going to get this out of the way first because people always try and put the name and the accent together. So before I get into my career, my accent's actually from the northeast of England. I've been here for 14 years. I was born in a place called Bishop Auckland, which was right next to West Auckland. So it's kind of appropriate that I ended up living in Auckland. And look, I love the place. I love cities, and I've always had a passion for cities and people. And my background's actually geography into transport planning, but over my role, I've spent a number of different roles over the years covering both planning, delivery, operations on the client side and the private side. So I've got a really cool perspective on what the different procurement models look like and how they're influenced on either side. For today, I'm going to concentrate on the client side, because I really do believe that when you're sat on the client side and working collaboratively with industry and key stakeholders around you, you can actually get some really great outcomes through procurement. And we've seen that shift a lot in New Zealand, at least over my 14 years. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, the importance about relationship, because I think you can have the best process in the world and you can have the best procurement in the world. If that's not matched with the right relationship and the right conversations, you can only get so far. So I'm going to cover that in terms of the client context and some of the things that we're doing at Auckland Transport, and covering a little bit on social procurement as well. I mean, we live in Auckland. Auckland is very diverse as a city, so we need to make sure that we're reflecting that through our procurement, and the social procurement initiatives that we've got at AT are something that was one of the reasons I joined. So just in terms of career background, I've worked in so take the last 14 years, public sector at NZTA, leading the transport planning team for a period in Auckland, also the delivery team. So I was working alongside Amelia when we're doing things such as Waterview tunnels, Manukau Harbour crossings, and all the different state highway projects which form part of the roads of national significance at the time and the accelerator programs. I moved over to Oricon as part of the global team for a period of 2 years. So I was setting up the integrated transport business across Oricon, covering the markets in Africa, Australia, Middle East, Asia, and New Zealand, mainly Australia, which gave me some good insight into what was going on over there. And I've got to say that as we come into New Zealand, we're not unique in terms of what we're doing, but from the relationship side, we've definitely got a lot of pluses that we can take into our procurement. And then more recently, I joined Auckland Transport, and 3 key reasons for that. One, I love the place and my family is here. Secondly, I do believe that through projects like the Eastern Busway downtown that Adam talked about, we can really leverage some great outcomes for the city and help to transform the business as well. So with that in mind and kind of going through procurement, if you look at the journey in New Zealand, for me, it's been one over the last 14 years that's moved from quite traditional into a more relationship-based procurement, but it is different across different parts of the country. And it's important to emphasize that it's not one thing that's going to get you there. There's a number of different models out there, and it's how you apply them through both relationship and what it is that you're trying to achieve and the problem you're trying to solve, which will make the difference. But it's fair to say, if you kind of go back 10 or so years, it was quite contractual. Some of the projects I worked in Australia were quite contractual as well. And from a client relationship with our contractors and consultants, it tended to be around the table in meetings, and the relationship came second. And that fundamentally doesn't drive great outcomes. But you don't need to have an alliance contract or a collaborative contract to not have a good relationship. You can have a hard money nose contract for the right thing that you're trying to solve and still be able to do that in the right way. But over the last 10 years, we have seen more of a movement from traditional contracts, measuring value. You started to see NZTA and other major government clients move into alliances, and that's been tweaked over time into competitive alliances through to more panel-based arrangements. And what I see for the future, just going through the construction accord, is a mixture of a lot more, say, collaborative relationship-based contracts, but at the lower level. So if you've got a simple problem to solve, you might get into more hard and money contracts, but you'll be doing those in a slightly different way. So the first point I wanted to kind of cover off was the relationship. So if you look at the journey from Auckland Transport, very traditional. If you kind of go back 5 or so years, a lot of stuff going through contracts. Lowest price was the way that we'd normally procure, and if you get that wrong, it doesn't deliver a good result. The contractor doesn't get paid in terms of the value that they're presenting, and from the client side, you don't always get it right in the scope that you've got up front. So generally, unless you've got something that you're absolutely certain around what it is that you want to do, it can lead into problems. And if you look at Auckland, there's an example. Everything we do now is becoming quite complex, big stakeholder relationships, complex environment, and we need to make sure that our procurement reflects the complexities. So then we moved into a lot of panel arrangements, so getting a good mixture of panels of contractors and consultants on board through things like the TTEPS panel and our contractor panels that can give us some good value in terms of the relationships that we're building, but it still gets us towards that price point that we need to get to. Because if you look at spending our taxpayers' money, and right now is very important in doing that, you need to make sure that we've got value for money. Again, that's had pros and cons. I think the pros are that you get to develop the relationship with those that are on the panel more closely. So the contractors you're working with, the consultants you're working with, but you're still rushing to the bottom in many cases and sometimes not getting it completely right. So if you kind of step ahead, where I see some of the larger, more complex contracts going and bundling up some of the smaller ones is into more collaborative arrangements. So we're going to likely see more panel type arrangements. Auckland Transport have just started on the first construction alliance. So that's an Eastern Busway. It's over 500 million, providing some great outcomes to the Eastern Auckland area once complete in 2025. But I mean, the reason we're going to an alliance for that particular project is it's big, it's complex. We've got a lot of key stakeholder relationships, and we absolutely believe that doing it together in partnership with the industry and our key stakeholders will get us better outcomes. It's going to mean less onerous consenting conditions, as Amelia was talking about, and it means that we actually get to deliver something that can give step change not only to the project itself around what happens on the ground, but also back into the business. So if I kind of look at the relationship side, as I say, it goes hand in hand with what you're doing, but at the same time, as a business, we're learning. If you kind of look at people have worked on contracts in a certain way for the last 10 years, it's like playing a football game. You can't just stop using your left foot and start using your right foot, or even both feet. We need to make sure that we're bringing people along on that journey, getting them into the contracts at the right time, but with the right training and development to be able to support a more relationship-based contract model. The second part is around process, and I kind of made the point, and you may have heard the term that culture eats strategy for breakfast. I'm a keen believer that relationship eats process for dinner as well, if we want to use that analogy, on the basis that we can have some great procurement, and that we're looking at how we really test ourselves with the program that we've got going ahead. But you might have the best process, the best procurement. If you don't have the right relationships sitting by that, fundamentally something will go wrong. So spending a lot of time on developing the procurement alongside industry is something that has been a real shift in how Auckland Transport have been handling what we do. An example of that is the Eastern Busway Alliance, where there's a lot of engagement going on up front around the model, around what we were trying to achieve, around where we wanted to end up. And as part of developing the model, we did that jointly with taking the industry feedback, but also working through that the business itself to make sure that we're getting the right results. So in summary, I think the world's changed in terms of the types of contracts that we're delivering, but the way that we do it and the how we do it is becoming very much more relationship focused, jointly co-designed procurement with industry, and you would have seen some of the recent examples from other government agencies. But looking to make sure that whatever contract model we sit in, and there's no thing that's right, because we've got a big lolly box to choose from. If you look at where we've been from the last 10 years, you get the right model, but you do it in the right way with the right relationships. And just to close off, I just wanted to capture on our social procurement, because that's a major part of the different types of procurement that we're running at Auckland Transport. Obviously, you'll hear from Norm to talk about the Southern Initiative, and we're doing a lot of work down there. In terms of the Eastern Busway projects in particular, just to give an example of some of the social procurement, we know that we don't just do a project and we're in and out of the community. We're going to be there for a long time, and you may come back again and do another project. You're going to be there operating the network. So for the Eastern Busway, we set up an arrangement whereby we're getting a number of the plants for the Eastern Busway stages 2, 3, 4 procured right now through social procurement, and having a local iwi down there doing the procurement on behalf of Auckland Transport. So basically they'll be supplying the plants for Eastern Busway that's in construction at the moment and the future Eastern Busway project, but hopefully that ends up becoming a sustainable business in its own right. And as a client, we get to leverage through our contracts to get some good outcomes. So being on the client side, just to close off, you've got a great opportunity to really shift the dial on how we do procurement through the things that you ask for, the relationships we've got in there. But by asking for things such as procuring plants, for example, you actually get to achieve not only social outcomes, but really change the industry and the community around you. So that's my 10 minutes, Adam. Shall I pass back over to you?
Yeah, thanks, Mish. No, that was awesome. Really, really undertake the word relationships and that feedback. And I like how you mentioned how making sure the procurement model fits the project's complexities. That's a big tip. And as mentioned, Auckland Transport are, in my eyes, they're leading the way in terms of social procurement. And the whole planting through Eastern Busway through Te Whāngai Trust, it's awesome. Thank you, Mish. And that's a great another segue into our third panellist for the afternoon, Norm McKenzie, who is with the Southern Initiative on behalf of the Auckland Council. So Norm has a career spanning 30 years in the corporate sector with his own business endeavours as part of that. Originally training as an accountant, Norm has held a wide range of roles and leadership in business throughout Auckland and the United Kingdom. He has sat on a number of iwi boards and authorities and for non-profit organisations. So Norm joined the Southern Initiative in January 2017 and leads the Māori and Pacifica Trades Training Team. He's been influential in the making of He Waka E Kanoa, as we've heard about today, a dedicated initiative to help support Māori and Pacifica businesses that undertake major contracts through wider supply chain opportunities. A great success, that one, Norm. So without further ado, Norm, are you able to give us a bit of a background to the attendees today on what the Southern Initiative is, and what is your perception on the emphasis of social outcomes and the well-being of New Zealanders given today's current market circumstances?
Kia ora, Adam, thank you for the introduction, and thank you to Mishko and Amelia for their presentations. O ngā mihi mahana kia koutou katoa. Greetings, warm greetings to everybody sitting in and listening to the panel. Just a brief background on the Southern Initiative, part of the Auckland City Council. So there we're based out in South Auckland. Our if you like, our vision is to lift the social and economic pace of South Auckland. So the Southern Initiative have been doing that rather well for my tenure there, nearly 3-4 years, and we've just set up the Western Initiative, which have the same objective for West Auckland. So as you might see, that it's a very focused on Māori and Pacifica, and particularly around the trades. So that's where the Southern Initiative is. It fits in quite nicely into the Auckland City Council. The good thing about being part of council is we've been given permission to be disruptive and to test and fail fast. So we can go to the market and come up with some great harebrained ideas using co-design as a model to get some of these new ideas into place and then test and fail them really quickly so that we know that they work. So with that in mind, I wanted to start off, if I could, with some statistics, recent ones. Now, economists are predicting a global post-COVID recession on the scale of the post-87 crash, when unemployment peaked at 11.4% in March 92. Infometrics predicts that unemployment could still be above 9% in 2022 and 6% in 2024. Infometrics also predicts that the biggest job losses ahead are going to be in accommodation and food, retail and wholesale and construction. And the fact of the matter is that in the GFC conundrum, youth bore the brunt of unemployment. So with those things in mind, I'd like to just outline further what the Southern Initiative are endeavouring to do to see that that doesn't repeat itself. So the final statistic that I will say is that, and it's taken from the Medlad Māori Economic Development Advisory Board, who basically came out with some statistics just recently in the last month. It states that basically, on an average Kiwi, if they lose their job in a crisis like COVID or the 87 GFC, it takes them about 6 months to find their feet, i.e. to get back into a job and to start being self-sustainable in their own right in that space. For Māori, it takes 12 years. So hopefully you get an understanding of why we've set up the Southern Initiative in the way that we've done that. So the Southern Initiative, Māori Pacifica Trades Training, is one of 16 consortia in Aotearoa. There are 2 in Auckland. There's the Auckland MPTT, and then there's the Southern Initiative, which is part of Auckland Council. We're funded by the Tertiary Education Commission, and we chose to use private training enterprises to drive our training initiatives, basically. So we use Aspire to Trade. Some of these you may know yourselves: Skills Update, Solomon Group, Kiwa, Mission Ready HQ, ETCO, Oceana, Career Academy, and Vertical Horizons. And we chose those ones specifically because the bigger organisations like MIT, AUT, Unitec, are big in nature, and we wanted small private enterprises that could be fleet of foot, that if we went to them from an employer perspective who said, look, we want to run some training programs that covered this specific area, we want it to be 9 weeks long, and we'll be able to transition people into jobs with dignity. We were able to go to one of those 8 private training enterprises. They would design it, and they'd pull it together, and then we'll go down to Tertiary Education Commission, who would sign it off through NZQA, and we would essentially deliver a fees-free program to Māori and Pacifica in that space. So the programs were all around infrastructure, construction, and the allied trades. So that's the front end or the middle end of what we're trying to achieve with our Māori Pacifica whānau. And the rationale behind it all, of course, is that South Aucklanders earn 30% less than the rest of Auckland. If you didn't know that, you now do. And it goes right back to the 70s when we had dawn raids and those things with our Pacifica whānau specifically, and Māori transitioning from rural into the central cities to find work. And essentially it became a hub for people to go and find cheap labour. It's as simple as that. And we're looking to lift that as part of that, and I'll talk a bit about that later. So with part of council, we've been able to be disruptive, and we've used our procurement environment within council to drive that space. So we've gone to them and said, look, we need some social outcome clauses introduced into our tender documents, so that therefore we can ensure and encourage our employers to take on people who have been challenged in life, and probably the most disparaging parts of our socioeconomic demise, and get them into the jobs that we think they deserve. So in doing that, we approached it, and the first one was with Auckland Transport, Miska talked about, and it was with the bus depot update at Manukau City. At the end of the day, New Zealand Strong won that contract, and to get into that contract, the organisations like Downers and New Zealand Strong had to come and talk to people like myself and see what a social outcome clause would look like. And within there, the clauses are written rather administratively, but we have chosen to transfer those into language that we understood. So the clauses essentially led to long-term sustainable staircased employment and a living wage strategy to be implemented over 12 to 24 months in Tāmaki Makaurau, Auckland, of $27.50 and nationwide $20 an hour. So that would change the landscape for our South Auckland people if we could get them to $27.50. It would put them on a par with the rest of Auckland. We have within our consortia 18 employers, of which Downers is one, and essentially we had their CEOs, managing directors or owners of companies came through and signed a memorandum of understanding with us. And in Downers' case, who Adam represents, that was Steve Kineen. So Steve came through with a senior leadership team, and I think Adam was part of that, and signed an MOU with us out at South Auckland. Spent 2.5 hours with us whilst we explained what jobs with dignity, and if I keep saying jobs with dignity, that's long-term sustainable staircased employment, and the Southern Initiative Living Wage strategy of $27.50 an hour in Auckland. So we've got those 18 employers. In conjunction with that, we've set up an organisation called He Waka Eke Noa, which is basically Māori and Pacifica businesses in the Auckland Isthmus. And we have over 150 organisations now that have Māori Pacifica. That's essentially to be part of He Waka Eke Noa, you need to be 51% Māori and or Pacifica owned, essentially. We've also been disruptive in the marketplace, set up organisations like Uptempo. Uptempo was about taking people in what we call sunset industries and migrating them into sunrise industries. So, for example, going from a manufacturing environment, very hands-on packaging type thing that has gone electronic, and therefore people lose their jobs. What we found was that people working in those industries, very loyal, were still earning less than $24 an hour, even though they've been in those particular organisations for nearly 20, 30 years, and provided a bit of a funnel for those employers through family, the mum and dad, the grandparents, and now the sons and daughters were now working for them. So what we did is tap certain people on the shoulder and said, look, we've got some opportunities in organisations as part of our MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, and we wanted to transition them into jobs with dignity. And we trialled that and it worked very well. So it really is about getting those people into those spaces and giving them the opportunity to do it. Our private training enterprises would train them in infrastructure, construction and the allied trades, and then we transition them into the employer. One of the big things we do is that we provide 13 months pastoral care with our people, because the people we're dealing with are typically MSD or Ministry of Social Development. They've been unemployed forever. We deal with people from 16 to 40-year-olds, Māori Pacifica, male and female. We have a target of bringing 30% of our consortia to be female into this space, so we can make a change in this whole dynamic around infrastructure and construction. So bringing that into that space has been quite a useful thing, and every year we get well above 30% in terms of women coming into that particular environment. Our private training enterprises do their own coaching and mentoring, but we've chosen to we have 5 people on our own staff that provide that, what we call Manaaki Tangata, or Pastoral Care Plus, and that goes from anything from transport, accommodation, childcare, any barrier that inhibits them from getting into jobs with dignity. We assist them with getting through that, all the way through that. So we have the private training advisors do that. We have a company called Social Labour Supply that contracts that for us. We have our own 5 coach mentors, which all work very well. We know that we're probably one of the most successful people in providing these people, our most disenfranchised families, into jobs with dignity. We have a 41% success rate of getting them into jobs with dignity, which is higher than any that I know of. We work with the Howard League and the Rural Trust to ensure that all our folk get driver's licenses, and they may start off day one as a learner, but they stay with them for the 2 years if it takes that long for them to get a full license, so that they're employable. That's one of the biggest barriers to getting them employment, along with drugs. We're running a drug rehabilitation co-design sprint as I speak. Over the COVID lockdown period, we were able to nail it and get New Zealand Drug Foundation and a number of other agencies to participate in that. We carried out a gap analysis around literacy and numeracy front end and post-employment, and we've found that we've got some collaborations we need to do there. We collaborate with the Auckland and other drug treatment courts, Kiwi Can Do, Limited Service Volunteers, MB, or the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Enterprise. We deal with ARA out at the airport, the CBD hub, Tamaki Regeneration, and the Manukau hub that's just been set up. We go behind the wire with Willie Women's in terms of the corrections facilities, Serco, Kura Waimanaki, and the probation whānau that we work with as well. So we work very strongly with our co-design team that sits under the Southern Initiative, Healthy Homes, whānau-centric model, and Up South, which is a youth platform that if any of you want to jump onto, just go online, have a look at Up South and join us. They're probably our most active members in our team when it comes to looking at initiatives and disruptiveness in our space. We work with all the schools, obviously, in South Auckland, with the Youth Employability Program, Dilworth School, etc. as well. So, and we also have a great employer, great employee sessions that we run bi-monthly, and we had our recent one by Zoom. I'm just conscious that there's a lot of information I'm throwing out there at the present time. I wanted to make sure that there's nothing there for you folk that are listening, that if you think there's something in there that you can take a hold of and present and use positively in the environment you're in, I would really appreciate you pushing that wagon out there to get more of our people involved in jobs with dignity that you're all enjoying, as I understand it right now. So I just wanted to probably finish on on a quote by one of our greats, Ernest Rutherford, who said some time ago now, Ernest Rutherford split the atom, if you might recall, and one of his greatest sayings I have a great affinity for is he walked into a boardroom one day and he said, "Gentlemen, we have run out of money. It is time to start thinking." And I just leave that for you to ponder as we do some great things coming out of COVID-19. Thank you, Adam. Back to you. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Rob. Thanks for that. No, that's really good insight and some really good initiatives coming out from TSI. And I know a lot of it is being implemented on the likes of Auckland Transport's, Amity Eastern Busway. And it's good to see that, there's the mixed diverse of Māori Pacifica, there's the women in construction, women in infrastructure. That's massive for us as a emerging talent and Infrastructure New Zealand committee focus. So that's great to see, and the younger generation. So thanks, Norm, and thanks to our 3 topics from our panelists. So we'll now head into the live Q&A session. And I think we've got one that's come through originally, and I might need to pitch this to about Mishko for a start. Is there a chance that with a change of government, a different direction for procurement will be prioritised?
We're changing government. So I've been through a change in government before. I think it's the procurement side of it didn't change too much, but the urgency around projects did. So I think a change in government could lead to certain things happening at a policy level. But I think with all the good work that's going on through the construction accord, a lot of co-design around procurement through industry, I can't see any direction, you never say never, but any direction that you'd move to a Pacific type of model, so to speak. But I definitely see there'd be more need to collaborate more, as I've talked about. I think there's definitely going to be a need to co-design procurements together, and that's been a lot of the conversation that we've been having during COVID as well. And I think with the budget side of it as well, and I did see a question in the chat. Sorry, I don't know if I'm jumping in, but the budget side of it presents us with opportunities to be smarter, and that doesn't matter which government's in. We've got opportunities to always be smarter around how we do our procurement. So if you look at a situation where you may not have as much money directly in front of you, it forces us to do things differently. It forces us to engage differently. So you start to see a lot more early contractor involvement, getting things ready to go. And in a situation where you may be budget constrained, it's a great opportunity to get things shovel ready through either ECI type arrangements, panels. So when you can press the go button and bounce back, you're ready to press the go button. So although I kind of see the difficulties coming out of COVID, and that will happen if there's a change in government or not, I think it's a huge opportunity just to be smarter around our procurement, more collaborative, earlier engagement, and that will lead to better overall outcomes in terms of what we do, whether it be alliancing, paneling, or whatever types of arrangements.
Perfect. That's good. Great response. And you covered a question within that as well. So thanks, Mish. One of the first questions for Norm, comment says Samosa Mahi from the Southern Initiative. Great to see the application of it out west. How can we support this work, and how can we take this ecosystem and its learnings and apply it across all of Aotearoa?
Yes, good question, and one that we're quite related to, in that we're not about getting scale to what we're trying to do. What we're about is systemic change. So what we do is when we have a successful outcome, which we have a number of within the Southern Initiative, we promote those down to the agency, central government, where they make policy changes to make that absolute within government, and that transitions through the whole organisation and hopefully throughout Aotearoa. And obviously it takes a wee while for policy change to take place, but that is occurring as well. It's an ever-ready thing to happen.
Perfect. And one for Amelia. Does expedited or fast-tracked RMA consenting lead to better procurement outcomes? I.e., I know you've explained the great benefits that it does bring, but how does the resources saved through quicker consenting actually enable better procurement?
Yeah, look, I think that's a really good question, and I think the answer is it does need the models to support it. So I think, and Mish has talked a bit about the collaborative and co-design of procurement models and procurement delivery, and certainly alliances, which is what I've been more familiar with in project delivery, I think really can create a way where the alliance is identifying what the outcomes are that project needs to deliver and working on how you can co-design to get to those. But I don't think the fast tracking consent process in and of itself will guarantee you a better outcome. I think it could be, you know, it could be, there could be a scenario where will have a poor outcome if it doesn't go hand in hand with the procurement model. And I think that's why the opportunities that have been explored at the moment, and particularly those co-design opportunities in terms of developing procurement systems, will be really integral and key to part of this, getting a fast track system that's then supported by a model for delivery that achieves good outcomes as part of its DNA, part of the way it's trying to deliver that project.
Thanks, Amelia. Another one come through from Katrina. Can you share some examples of innovative types of procurement models that have been used in other parts of the world? This is open, so for any three who wants to answer that.
Yep.
Mishko's been all around the world.
Scribbling away now. So I think if you look at some of the Australian alliances, I mean, it's similar to New Zealand in a certain respect, but you got some that are more pure in that they do hand full responsibility over to the alliance. So I mean, that's one example. I think PPPs are another innovative one. Depending, they do have pros and cons, but obviously in New Zealand, we've got 2 PPPs at the moment, but across the world, if you get the framework right, they have been successful. I think if you go into the UK market as well, there's some quite interesting ones based on panels. That's all about sharing innovation. So you imagine you've got contractor A, B, C working on similar things, but different parts of the country. So I'm just talking through highways England as an example. You want to try and get those contractors sharing the best innovation that they can between each other, but under separate contracts, they're not normally incentivized to do that. So they did put a separate pool of money to one side, which each of the contracts could tap into. So if you're sharing innovation on one contract, you get to tap into a pool of money here. And that pool of money goes up and down depending on how much collaboration is happening between the 3 different contracts. So effectively trying to share lessons between all 3 through having a separate pot of money to one side. But I think if you look at the innovative procurement that you've got, a lot of it is targeted around how to get people more collaborative in terms of the way that they're working. Other types of procurement can move more into a public-private financing situation, so using things like land value capture to basically procure developments as well as transport. So you're developing a particular area or a transport hub, and you can wrap procurement around that to basically incentivize the procurers to draw off the gains of the land as value goes up. So there's different examples of that across Australia as well and the UK.
Interesting. So I think we'll wrap up with one more question, which I find quite a good one here, and it's open to all 3 panelists. So what advice would you give the ET members who might find themselves in a difficult position trying to convince their superior that price should not be the main scoring element?
Look, I'm happy to start that conversation off, Adam. Look, I know that there's only 3 objections in life, and it's price, quality, and service. And to answer the question, you've got to come up with the quality and the service value add or point of difference that leads your superiors to make the decision as if it's their own. And that's what you've got to do. Every business, as far as I'm concerned, needs to put into their budget model that $27.50 an hour is the go-to rate as a norm, so that it becomes the norm in a budget process. You guys are in a really strong position as being part of this infrastructure construction industry to make a difference. And the young people are where it's going to start and stop, as far as I'm concerned. So you just need to come up with the unique selling point that makes it a difference. And if I can give you a lead into that, what I'd suggest you do is Google Supply Nation in Australia, run by a young lady by the name of Laura Dixon, the CEO, and that's what we modelled here, Waka Ke Nora off. And they, in I think 7 years, that organisation went to winning $40 million worth of contract to last year winning over $1 billion. And they do that because of social procurement analogies that show benefits to the environment and cultural diversity as part of their thinking in terms of adding value. And they can come up with distinctions for you to say that value is added by in that space around corporate space around cultural diversity and also the environment, and they'll give you a dollar value that'll go with that. So that would be my penny's worth.
Yeah, awesome.
Mine would
Awesome.
probably be pretty similar, and it's a difficult one. As planners, you always come up with rules for things, but I think as a board member, I think the one thing that I always look at when we're looking at this is that reputation or that legacy, which is what Norm's talking to, and it's the value that you can put on that sort of social contract with the communities that you're working in, your right to be there, your if you want to put it in its most cynical, the bragging rights, I suppose, but the legacy of things that you create and the name that makes for you. And I think that's where dollar value becomes, it's a much easier challenge to look at. It's not just a dollar value when you're looking at that sort of legacy benefit as well.
Yeah, I'm very similar as well. What I've written down here is focus on the outcomes. So it's not just about the dollar value. As we've heard from Norm and Amelia, value is represented in a number of different ways. And I think it's getting whoever it is that you're talking to focus on the outcomes of what you're trying to achieve here, which is a number of different things. And we've got to remember as well, we just focus on the dollars and rush to the bottom. What you end up with in terms of a project is never what you get through a tender box. And that manifests itself in a lot of different ways. So yeah, focus on the outcome and just remember that value is inherent in a lot of different ways.
Agree. I totally agree. Well, again, I'd like to thank all three of the panelists today for your time. Really interested in seeing where these procurement models and the changes affect projects in the future. And yeah, would like to thank the Emerging Talent Committee on behalf of Infrastructure New Zealand for the time today. So thanks again all, and no doubt we'll be seeing these projects and initiatives come into implementation in the soon future. Thanks again.
Cheers, Adam.